The Zorath Empire stretched across hundreds of star systems. For generations, they ruled with power and certainty. Their fleets were vast, their armies strong, and their influence reached far beyond their borders. In their libraries and records, there were many stories of other species, some real and some only myths. Among the oldest tales was the story of humans. These tales spoke of a species that once moved among the stars with courage, cleverness, and great willpower. But according to the Zorath scholars, humans were gone, nothing more than shadows from the past. In the council chambers of Zorath Prime, leaders often laughed when the subject of humans came up. To them, it was like a fairy tale told to children. Young commanders mocked the idea, saying that humans were no different from the imaginary monsters described in bedtime stories. But not everyone dismissed these tales so easily. Admiral Kethra, an older officer with scars from many battles, was not so quick to laugh. She had studied ancient maps, read strange reports, and seen ruins on moons that looked too advanced to belong to any known species. She wondered if the old stories were not just legends, but warnings. On one quiet night, as Kithra sat in her quarters looking at the star charts, a message came from the Vega corridor. A fleet patrol had picked up strange readings. At first, the commanders thought it was nothing unusual, just interference or pirates. But then the sensors cleared, and they saw something they could not explain. Huge ships, massive and unlike anything in the Zorath database, moved with precision through space. Their designs were unfamiliar, their energy readings stronger than any Zorath vessel could produce. The commander on duty froze, unsure what to say. He sent the images to Zorath Prime, where Kethra was called to view them. As the recordings played, her heart tightened. She recognized something in the shape of the ship, something from the old records. They carried an aura of strength and purpose. When the ships finally transmitted a signal, the words were simple. The message read, "We are Earthborn." Far from the Zorath worlds, on one of those massive ships, Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge. He was tall, with calm eyes that showed no fear. Around him, his crew worked quietly but with clear focus. They were descendants of hidden colonies, people who had kept the old Earth spirit alive even when the galaxy had forgotten them. For centuries, humanity had lived in secret, rebuilding, preparing, and waiting for the right time to return. Now that time had come. Daniel looked out at the stars, feeling the weight of history. His people had been silent for too long. Generations had lived without revealing themselves, watching the galaxy grow and change, but they had not disappeared. They had trained, studied, and built. The Terran Armada was no accident. It was the result of careful planning and determination. For Daniel and his crew, this was not a mission of conquest but of survival. They wanted to show the galaxy that humanity was still alive and stronger than ever. Beside Daniel, his second-in-command, Rebecca Lawson, gave him a quiet nod. She was sharp, brave, and deeply loyal to her people. Like Daniel, she knew this moment would change everything. The galaxy thought of humans as myths, but now the truth would be revealed. "They will not believe it," Lawson said softly. Daniel answered, "They don't have to believe. They will see." On Zorath Prime, chaos broke out in the council chambers. The words Earthborn echoed across the hall. Some leaders shouted that it was a trick, perhaps another species pretending to be humans. Others argued that no one could fake such ships or such power. Fear spread quickly. The Zorath had heard the legends. Humans were not the strongest or the most advanced, but they were said to be relentless. Once they set their minds to something, they never stopped. If the stories were true, then humanity's return could shake the entire balance of power. Admiral Kethra sat silently as the council argued. She remembered her studies, the ruins on forgotten moons, the strange signals over the years. Now all of it made sense. The humans had not vanished. They had hidden, and now they were back. Back on the Terran flagship, engineers worked without rest. Laura Grant, head of engineering, checked every system, making sure the weapons were ready and the shields strong. But Captain Hayes had given clear orders. No attack unless absolutely necessary. He wanted diplomacy first. Humanity had not come to start wars but to protect its colonies and secure its place again among the stars. Still, the fleet was ready. The ships moved in formation, silent but strong. Every crew member knew what was at stake. They were not only fighting for themselves but for Earth, for the forgotten home that still lived in their memories. Even after centuries of silence, Earth was not dead. Its spirit was alive in every person standing on those decks. The first contact between humans and Zorath ships was brief but sharp. Zorath commanders demanded identification, sneering at the idea that these could be humans. When Captain Hayes sent the simple reply, "We are Earthborn," the Zorath commanders hesitated. For a moment, neither side moved. Space was silent, but the silence carried the weight of a storm about to break. Among the crew, tension rose. Pilots like Aaron Cole and Sophia Brooks sat ready in their fighters, their hands steady but their hearts racing. They knew that one wrong move could start a war. Yet they also knew this was their moment to show what humanity could do. They whispered to each other through the comms, not with fear but with determination. "Whatever happens," Sophia said, "they will remember us." On Earth, leaders watched through long-range communications. For years, debates had raged about whether to reveal themselves or remain hidden. Many had argued that silence was safer. But when colonies were threatened and human ships attacked by outsiders, the decision became clear. It was time to rise. It was time for the galaxy to know the truth. The Zorath Council split into factions. Some wanted immediate war, fearing that humans would grow too strong. Others, more cautious, remembered whispers from ancient times. It was said that the last empire that tried to destroy humanity vanished from history, leaving only ruins behind. These leaders warned that underestimating humans would be a mistake. Admiral Kethra listened carefully, knowing that the Empire stood on the edge of a decision that could shape the future. She had fought many battles, but something inside her told her this was different. The humans were not like other enemies. They carried themselves with quiet confidence, with a strength that came not from arrogance but from survival. They had endured centuries of hiding, and yet they returned not broken but stronger. As the Council argued, the human fleet continued to move. The ships of the Terran Armada spread out across the Vega corridor, their presence undeniable. The galaxy that once forgot them would now have to face them. Myths had become reality, and reality was about to change. Captain Hayes stood silently on his bridge, watching the stars, feeling the eyes of history upon him. This was only the beginning. Humanity had stepped back into the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same again. The message sent by Captain Daniel Hayes spread like fire across Zorath space. The words were simple, yet they carried power. "We are Earthborn." To the Zorath commanders, it was more than identification. It was a challenge to the very history they believed. Across Zorath Prime, fear and doubt grew. If the humans had returned, then everything they thought about galactic order would change. Rumors flew through the markets, through military posts, and even into schools. Children asked teachers if the stories of humans were true. Traders whispered in secret halls, saying they had heard of colonies hidden beyond the stars. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was shaken by a single name: humanity. In the Terran flagship Horizon, Captain Hayes gathered his officers. Rebecca Lawson stood beside him, calm but serious. Laura Grant, the engineer, brought updates about the ship's systems. Aaron Cole and Sophia Brooks, the best fighter pilots, sat quietly, waiting for orders. The room was tense but united. Hayes spoke slowly, making sure every word was clear. "We do not come to rule. We do not come to conquer. We come to show that Earth still lives." His voice carried strength but also patience. Lawson added, "But if they test us, we will defend ourselves. And we will not lose." Every officer nodded. They understood their mission. Humanity had chosen to step out of the shadows, but this step would bring danger. The Zorath Empire was powerful, and fear could push them into war. The humans had smaller numbers, but they had something different: creativity, flexibility, and determination. For years they had trained in silence, preparing for this day. On Zorath Prime, the council chambers were filled with shouting. Some counselors demanded immediate attack. They said the humans must be destroyed before their strength grew. Others warned caution. They reminded the council of ancient ruins and forgotten battles. One elder stood and said, "Legends do not vanish so easily. If the humans are back, then we must tread carefully. They may not be as weak as they look." But the younger leaders laughed. To them, the humans were only a small force, a noise to be silenced. Admiral Kethra listened in silence. She had lived through too many wars to take this lightly. Her eyes stayed fixed on the images of the Terran ships. They were not random. Their movements showed discipline, and their designs were advanced. More advanced than most empires had believed possible for a species thought extinct. She knew at once that this was not an enemy to underestimate. While the Zorath argued, the Terran fleet prepared. In secret chambers deep within the horizon, messages were sent back to Earth. Across hidden colonies, leaders gathered to watch. The Council of Earth had long debated whether they should reveal themselves. For generations, they had stayed hidden, sending ships only to explore or protect distant settlements. Many believed silence was safety. But when Zorath patrols began to press into the edges of human space, the decision became clear. Silence would not protect them forever, so Earth chose to rise. Now their fleet stood in the open, their banners carrying the word Earthborn. Life aboard the horizon was filled with quiet energy. The crew felt the weight of history, but they also felt pride. For the first time, they could stand openly as human without fear. Young cadets like Dylan Carter whispered about what it meant to serve in such a fleet. He had grown up hearing stories of Earth as a shining home that they could never return to. Now he saw that humanity could return to the galaxy, not broken but whole. Every day he trained harder, ready for the battles to come. Rebecca Lawson walked through the ship's halls, speaking with crew members, giving them strength. She understood their fears. Many were worried about facing the Zorath Armada. The Zorath were larger, more experienced in ruling vast regions. But Lawson reminded them of who they were. "We are not here because it is easy," she told a group of young pilots. "We are here because we never gave up. That is what makes us human." Her words spread across the ship, lifting spirits, reminding them of their purpose. The first meeting between Terran ships and Zorath warships came at the border of the Helion Belt. The Zorath sent messages filled with threats, demanding surrender. Captain Hayes refused. He responded only with calm words, "We are Earthborn. We do not surrender." The Zorath commanders grew angry. To them, surrender was the only choice for a smaller power. But the humans did not flinch. For days, both sides held their positions, watching, waiting, and testing each other with small movements. Human pilots ran quiet patrols observing Zorath formations. Engineers checked every weapon and shield system twice. The Horizon and her sister ships moved with discipline, never breaking formation. On the Zorath side, frustration grew. They were used to enemies showing fear. The humans showed none. On Earth, the Council gathered again. Through long-range communications, they received updates from Hayes. They saw the images of the Zorath ships lined up in massive numbers. Some leaders worried. "We cannot fight them head-to-head," one said. But others argued differently. They reminded the Council of humanity's strength, the ability to adapt, to change, to fight with spirit even when outnumbered. In the end, the Council gave Hayes full command. "The galaxy must know who we are," they said. "Do what you must." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, smaller species watched with growing curiosity. The Ketheri, a minor power once loyal to the Zorath, listened carefully to reports. They heard that humans had returned, and that they stood firm against the Empire. To the Cathari, this was more than news. It was hope. For years they had lived under Zorath's shadow, obeying their commands without question. Now, perhaps, there was another choice. Inside the Horizon strategy room, Hayes and Lawson studied the maps. They knew the Zorath would not wait forever. War was coming. Lawson placed her hand on the star map, tracing the lines of possible battles. "They will attack in the Helion Belt," she said. "It is the perfect place for them to trap us." Hayes nodded. "Then we make it the place where we show them who we are." Laura Grant entered with new reports from the engineering teams. "Shields are ready. Weapons are charged. We have done all we can. The rest is in the hands of the crew." She looked at Hayes with steady eyes. "Captain, whatever happens, we are ready." Hayes gave a small smile. "We are more than ready. We are human." In the silence of space, the two fleets faced each other, waiting for the storm to begin. The Zorath commanders believed they would crush the humans quickly. But deep in their hearts, some felt a small fear. The humans were calm, too calm. And calm enemies were often the most dangerous. On the horizon, Dylan Carter sat at his station, heart pounding. He thought of Earth, of the generations that had lived and died in hiding. He thought of the chance now before them, and he whispered quietly to himself, "They will remember us." His words, though soft, carried the spirit of all humanity. The stage was set. The galaxy watched. The humans had spoken their name. The Zorath had answered with threats. Soon the myths would be tested in battle, and the truth of humanity would be revealed. The Helion Belt became the place where history would turn. For weeks, the Terran fleet and the Zorath Armada faced each other across the silent stars. Neither side fired the first shot. The tension grew heavier with each passing day, like a storm gathering strength. Pilots trained endlessly. Engineers checked every system, and officers studied maps and formations again and again. Everyone knew the first battle would define the future. If the humans lost, they might be forced back into hiding. If they won, the galaxy would never forget their return. On the horizon, Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge, watching the Zorath fleet from a distance. His crew waited for orders, their faces calm but serious. Rebecca Lawson stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "They will strike soon," she said quietly. Hayes nodded. "Yes, they think they can trap us here, but we will not let them." In the fighter bay, Aaron Cole and Sophia Brooks prepared their squadrons. Aaron tightened his gloves, his jaw set with focus. Sophia checked her ship carefully, whispering to herself as she worked. Around them, younger pilots looked nervous, their hands shaking slightly as they strapped into their fighters. Sophia noticed and spoke softly into her comms. "Breathe steady. Remember your training. We fly together. None of us are alone." Her words gave comfort, and the young pilot straightened with new resolve. Meanwhile, across the field of stars, the Zorath Armada gathered in massive numbers. Their ships stretched like a wall of steel, thousands strong. Admiral Vorin, commander of the Zorath fleet, sneered as he studied the humans. "They are few," he said to his officers. "We will crush them quickly, and the myth will die once and for all." His younger commanders laughed, eager for battle. But one older officer frowned. "Admiral, they do not act like prey. They are calm. Too calm." Vorin dismissed him with a wave. "They are cornered. Calm is only a mask for fear." The first shot came at dawn cycle. A Zorath cruiser moved forward and fired across the human line. The beam streaked through space, bright and sharp. For a moment, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then the horizon returned fire. The battle had begun. The Helion belt exploded with light. Ships darted and fired, shields flared, and debris spun into the darkness. The Zorath came in heavy, relying on their massive numbers and rigid formations. They moved like a wall, pressing forward with overwhelming strength. But the humans did not fight like a wall. They moved like water, flowing around the enemy, striking at weak points and pulling back before the Zorath could respond. Rebecca Lawson coordinated the fleet with quick, sharp commands. "Squadron Delta, swing to the left. Strike at their supply ships. Beta Wing, cut through the center, then retreat to regroup." Human ships responded instantly, adapting to changes in the battle. They did not hold a single formation. They shifted again and again, confusing the Zorath. For every human ship destroyed, 3 Zorath ships fell in return. In the fighter bay, Aaron Cole led his squadron into the heart of the enemy. His fighter twisted and turned with impossible speed, striking at engines and shield systems. Sophia Brooks flew close by, her movements sharp and graceful. Together they cut through enemy lines, giving the larger Terran ships room to strike. Over comms, Aaron shouted, "Keep moving. Don't let them lock on." His squadron obeyed, weaving through fire and striking with deadly accuracy. Back on the horizon, Laura Grant worked with her engineering teams as alarms rang. "Shields at 60%, one officer cried. Sparks flew from the consoles and the floor shook with every impact. But Laura stayed calm. "Reroute power from secondary systems. Focus on the shields. Keep the weapons charged. We are not breaking here." Her steady voice kept the team focused even as the battle raged around them. The Zorath commanders grew frustrated. Their enemies should have broken under such pressure. But instead, the humans grew stronger with each passing hour. Admiral Vorin slammed his fist against the console. "Why are they not falling? Why can they not be crushed?" His officers scrambled for answers, but none came. For the first time, the Zorath felt something they had not expected: doubt. The battle stretched into hours, then into days. The Helion belt became a storm of fire and wreckage. Human ships darted in and out, striking, retreating, then striking again. Zorath ships fell in greater numbers, their rigid strategies unable to adapt to the chaos. Pilots like Aaron and Sophia became legends in the middle of the fight, their courage inspiring others to press forward. Dylan Carter, the young cadet, worked at his station with hands that no longer shook. He sent messages across the fleet, coordinating squadrons, relaying Lawson's commands. His voice grew stronger with each order. At one point, when a squadron leader fell silent, Dylan stepped in without hesitation. "This is Carter. Follow my lead. We'll cut through their flank and regroup near the horizon. His quick thinking saved the squadron, and the pilots hailed him afterward as a true officer in the making. As the battle dragged on, Captain Hayes stood firm. He gave orders with calm precision, never raising his voice, never showing fear. His presence was like a stone in the storm, unshakable. Even when the horizon shook from enemy fire, Hayes only looked forward. "Hold steady," he told his crew. "This is our place. This is where we prove who we are." At last, the tide began to turn. The Zorath fleet, once confident, now struggled to maintain formation. Their losses grew too heavy, their lines too broken. Admiral Vorin shouted for his ships to hold, but panic spread through his ranks. One by one, Zorath ships retreated, leaving wreckage behind them. When the final shots faded, the silence of space returned. Debris drifted, shields dimmed, and fires flickered on broken ships. The Terran fleet, though smaller and scarred, still stood. The humans had held the line. Against impossible odds, they had fought the Empire's Armada and survived. On the horizon's bridge, the crew sat in stunned silence. Then Rebecca Lawson whispered, "We did it." Laura Grant smiled faintly, exhausted but proud. Aaron and Sophia returned to the bay, their fighters scorched but still flying. Dylan Carter looked at his hands, now steady, and whispered to himself, "They will remember us." Captain Hayes looked out at the stars, his eyes calm. He knew this was only the beginning. The Zorath would not forgive such a loss, but the galaxy had seen the truth. Humans were not myths. They were real and they were strong. Hayes raised his head and spoke to his crew. "Today we showed them. Tomorrow they will come again. And tomorrow we will be ready." Across the galaxy, whispers spread faster than light. In marketplaces, in military stations, in hidden colonies, everyone spoke the same words. The humans are back. Oppressed species felt hope for the first time in centuries. The balance of power had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. In the quiet aftermath, Admiral Kethra stood on her own bridge, staring at the distant reports. She felt a strange mix of fear and respect. The humans had proven themselves not with numbers but with spirit. She knew the Zorath Council would demand revenge, but in her heart, she wondered if it was even possible to crush such a people. For the first time, she felt the truth of the legends. The humans were relentless. They would never fade again. The Helion Belt, once only a field of rocks and dust, was now a monument to history. It was the place where myths became real, where legends returned to life. And in the hearts of every survivor, one truth burned bright. Humanity had risen and the galaxy would never forget. The battle at the Helion Belt changed everything. The Zorath Empire, once confident and untouchable, had been shaken. Their ships were larger, their numbers greater, but still they had failed to crush the humans. News of the fight spread across the galaxy faster than any fleet could travel. Stories of human courage passed from one system to another. Whispers filled the air markets, starports, and even the private halls of rulers. The words were always the same. Humans are real and they are strong. On Zorath Prime, the Council was thrown into chaos. The defeat was a wound to their pride. Leaders argued, shouting over one another, each with a different plan. Some demanded that the humans be destroyed at once, no matter the cost. Others urged caution, fearing that rushing into another battle would only bring more losses. The chambers echoed with anger, fear, and denial, but Admiral Kethra sat quietly in her seat, her eyes heavy with thought. She had seen many enemies in her life, but none like this. She could feel it. These humans would not be broken so easily. Meanwhile, in the Terran fleet, victory brought both relief and weight. On the horizon, Captain Daniel Hayes gathered his officers. The battle had proven their strength, but it also proved something else. The Zorath would not stop until humanity was destroyed or forced into submission. Hayes spoke to his crew with steady words. "We want a battle, not the war. The Zorath will come again and in greater numbers. We must be ready." Rebecca Lawson stood at his side, adding her voice. "Our survival depends on unity. Every ship, every pilot, every colony must stand together. Alone we are strong, but united we are unbreakable." Her words carried through the halls of the horizon and into the hearts of the crew. They had fought with courage, but now they understood the truth. Their fight was only beginning. Across distant star systems, other species watched carefully. The Cathari, once loyal servants to the Zorath, sent secret envoys to meet the humans. Their leader, a cautious elder named Vela, arrived aboard a Terran ship under heavy guard. She was small and frail compared to the towering Zorath, but her eyes held wisdom. In a quiet chamber, she spoke with Captain Hayes. "We heard stories of your kind," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We were told you were gone. Yet here you are, alive and unbroken. If you stand against the Zorath, perhaps we too can find a way to be free." Hayes did not promise them easy answers. Instead, he spoke with honesty. "We do not seek to rule over others. We fight because we must, to protect our people and our home. If you wish to stand with us, we will welcome you as allies, not subjects." Vela's eyes filled with hope, a feeling she had not known in decades. For the Cathari, this was a chance at freedom. Back on Earth, messages from the horizon filled the council chambers. The leaders of Earth debated endlessly. Some worried that alliances with other species would bring new dangers. Others believed it was the only path forward. In the end, the decision was clear. Humanity could no longer fight alone. The Terran Armada would seek allies, building a coalition strong enough to resist the Empire. Life aboard the horizon grew heavier with purpose. Young cadets like Dylan Carter trained harder, pushing themselves beyond exhaustion. They knew they were part of something far larger than themselves. Dylan often sat alone in the observation deck staring at the stars. He thought of Earth, the home he had never seen, and whispered to himself, "We will not lose. We cannot lose." His quiet vow carried the same spirit that lived in every human heart. In the fighter bays, Aaron Cole and Sophia Brooks repaired their ships, preparing for the next battle. They spoke little, their bond built not on words but on trust. They had flown through fire together, and they knew they would do it again. Sophia looked at Aaron and said softly, "The galaxy thinks we're fighting to survive, but I think we're fighting to remind ourselves who we are." Aaron nodded, his face calm but resolute. "And who we are is enough." The Zorath Empire did not remain silent. Within weeks, their leaders declared humanity a threat to galactic order. They broadcast messages across the stars, warning other species to stay away from the Terrans. They promised safety to any who stood with them and destruction to those who did not. But the galaxy had already seen the truth. The humans were not conquerors. They were survivors, and survivors often made the most dangerous enemies. Admiral Kethra watched her empire's response with unease. She knew the council was making a mistake. Declaring war so quickly without thought would only fuel humanity's resolve. But her warnings went unheard. To the younger leaders, pride mattered more than caution. They could not accept the idea that myths had defeated them. They would strike again, and harder. Back in the Terran fleet, the captains gathered for a war council. In a large chamber aboard the horizon, they sat around a glowing map of the stars. Hayes opened the meeting with simple words. "The Zorath will come. We must be ready. Our strength lies not only in weapons, but in our will." Rebecca Lawson leaned forward, her voice sharp with conviction. "For centuries, we lived in silence. We hid because we feared what would happen if we revealed ourselves. But now the galaxy sees us. We cannot hide again. We must show them the truth of humanity, not just in battle, but in how we stand, how we live, how we treat others." Some captains worried that their fleet was too small, too fragile to face the Zorath again. But Hayes reminded them of the Helion Belt. They had numbers. They had strength. But they did not win, we did. That is the proof we need. Outside the council, life went on with a mix of fear and hope. Families aboard the fleet whispered prayers for their loved ones. Children in hidden colonies learned of Earth, not just as a lost home, but as a symbol of strength. Traders in distant markets spoke of human ships with awe. Even in Zorath-controlled space, whispers of resistance began to rise. The myths had returned, and they carried not only weapons, but the power of inspiration. For Admiral Kethra, the choice became clear. Though still loyal to her empire, she began to quietly gather her own notes, her own thoughts. She studied the humans carefully, searching for patterns. She did not yet know whether she would face them as enemy or ally. But deep inside, she respected them. She had fought for her empire all her life, but she could not ignore what her eyes told her. The humans were different. In the weeks that followed, the Terran Armada prepared for the inevitable. Ships were repaired, new recruits trained, and alliances began to form. Humanity had shown the galaxy they were not myths, and now the galaxy would test them again. The question was no longer whether humans existed. The question was whether they could endure. On the horizon's bridge, Captain Hayes stood once more watching the stars. He felt the weight of history, the eyes of billions upon him. But he did not falter. His voice, calm and steady, carried across the ship. "We are Earthborn. We are survivors. Whatever comes, we will not break." His words echoed through the halls, filling every heart with resolve. The galaxy was shifting. The Zorath prepared for war. Smaller powers weighed their choices, and whispers of rebellion stirred. In the center of it all stood humanity. No longer myths, no longer hidden. The next battle would decide more than survival. It would decide what place humans would hold in the galaxy. Would they become the monsters others feared, or the allies others longed for? Only time would tell, but one truth was certain. The humans were here, and they would never fade again. The final confrontation came faster than many expected. After their defeat at the Helion Belt, the Zorath Empire refused to wait. They gathered the largest fleet in their history, calling it the Grand Armada. Every ship that could be built or repaired was sent. Thousands of warships formed together, stretching across the stars like an endless storm. Their orders were simple: crush the humans once and for all. The galaxy would see that no myth could challenge the Empire. In the Terran fleet, scouts brought word of the gathering storm. On the horizon, Captain Daniel Hayes stood with Rebecca Lawson and the other captains around the star map. The reports were grim. The Zorath had numbers that dwarfed their own. Many officers shifted uneasily, their faces showing worry, yet Hayes remained calm. "They believe numbers alone will win," he said. "But they do not understand us. They do not understand humanity." Rebecca Lawson leaned forward, her voice firm. "They think we are a story. They think we will break. But we are not myths. We are here, and we will fight." Her words struck deep into the hearts of the officers. They remembered the Helion Belt, where they had faced impossible odds and still held the line. If they could do it once, they could do it again. All across the Terran fleet, preparations began. Laura Grant led her engineers through endless checks. Systems were repaired, weapons charged, and shields strengthened. Young cadets like Dylan Carter worked day and night, carrying supplies, learning commands, and preparing for what was to come. In the fighter bays, Aaron Cole and Sophia Brooks trained their squadrons harder than ever, drilling again and again until every pilot could fly as one. Fear was present, but it did not control them. Instead, determination burned brighter. The chosen battlefield was the Orion Expanse, a vast region of open space. There were no asteroids to hide behind, no planets to use for cover. It would be a direct clash, fleet against fleet. Some Terran officers feared such a place, but Hayes saw it differently. "Let them come," he said. "We will meet them in the open. The galaxy will see the truth with their own eyes." As the Zorath Grand Armada approached, tension filled every ship. On the horizon's bridge, silence hung heavy. The crew looked to Hayes, waiting. His calm presence gave them strength. At last, the enemy appeared, thousands of ships filling the stars with fire and steel. The sight made even the bravest hearts falter. Yet Hayes only said, "Steady. This is our place. This is where we stand." The battle began with thunder. The Zorath fired in waves, their weapons lighting the expanse with deadly brilliance. Human ships shook under the assault, shields sparking and alarms screaming. But the Terrans did not break. Lawson directed the fleet with sharp, adaptive orders. "Squadron Alpha, cut through their flank. Gamma Wing, pull back, then strike again from above." Human ships moved like dancers, twisting through the chaos, never staying where the Zorath expected. Aaron Cole and Sophia Brooks led their fighters into the storm. Their squadrons weaved through enemy fire, striking at engines and weak points. "Keep moving," Aaron shouted. "They can't hit what they can't catch." Sophia's voice came steady over comms. "Stay close. Strike together." Their courage inspired their pilots, who fought with a unity that surprised even themselves. On the horizon, Laura Grant's engineering teams worked under fire. Explosions rattled the ship, but she kept her people steady. "Hold the shields. Divert power to the forward array. Keep the weapons alive." Her hands moved across consoles as sparks flew around her. When a system failed, she improvised, creating new solutions in moments. The horizon stayed in the fight because of her and her team. The Zorath pressed hard, but their rigid formations became their weakness. The Terrans adapted, changing patterns, striking where the enemy was weakest. Each time the Zorath tried to trap them, the humans slipped free, turning the trap against them. Slowly, the tide began to shift. Human losses were heavy, but Zorath losses were greater. Their lines began to falter. Admiral Vorin, leading the Grand Armada, shouted in rage, "Press forward! They cannot win. But doubt spread through his fleet. They had expected a quick victory. Instead, they faced an enemy that refused to yield. For every ship destroyed, the humans fought harder. For every loss, their will only grew stronger. Dylan Carter, sitting at his station, relayed orders across the fleet. His voice was steady, no longer that of a nervous cadet but of a true officer. When one squadron leader fell, Dylan stepped in again, guiding the pilots to safety. "Hold together. Strike now. Pull back, then regroup." His quick commands saved lives, and the pilots trusted him completely. The battle raged for hours, then stretched into days. The Orion expanse became a sea of fire. Wreckage drifted, explosions lit the dark, and still neither side surrendered. But slowly the Zorath began to break. Their formations crumbled, their commanders grew desperate, and fear spread through their ranks. At last the final blow came. The Horizon and her sister ships pushed through the center of the enemy fleet, striking at their command ships. Lawson directed the attack with precision, guiding every strike. Aaron and Sophia led their fighters in one last desperate charge, crippling the Zorath flagships. When Admiral Voron's command ship exploded in a wave of fire, the Zorath fleet faltered completely. One by one, their ships began to retreat. Silence fell across the Orion expanse. Fires burned, debris floated, but the Terran fleet still stood, scarred, battered, but unbroken. Against the greatest fleet the Zorath had ever gathered, humanity had endured. On the Horizon's bridge, the crew sat in stunned quiet. Then cheers rose, soft at first, then louder, until the ship shook with voices. Laura Grant smiled through exhaustion, her hands black with burns from the consoles. Aaron and Sophia returned, their fighters damaged but alive. Dylan Carter sat back, breathless, realizing he had become part of history. Rebecca Lawson looked at Hayes, her eyes filled with pride. "It's over," she said softly. But Hayes shook his head. "No, the battle is over, but the war is not. Still, today we showed them who we are. Today the galaxy saw the truth." He turned to the comms officer. "Open a channel. Broadcast to every system that can hear us." When the channel opened, Hayes spoke simple words. "We are not myths. We are not gone. We are Earthborn. We are survivors, and we will stand." His voice carried across the stars, reaching worlds that had only heard whispers. For the oppressed, it was a message of hope. For the fearful, it was a warning. For the Zorath, it was a promise. Across the galaxy, reactions came swiftly. Some species cheered in secret, dreaming of freedom. Others sent envoys, hoping to join with the humans. Even in Zorath space, whispers of rebellion grew louder. The balance of power had shifted forever. Admiral Kethra, who had watched from afar, bowed her head. She had warned her council. Now she saw the truth with her own eyes. The humans were real, they were strong, and they could not be erased. She felt both fear and respect. Deep inside, she wondered if one day she would fight beside them rather than against them. In the quiet after the storm, the Terran fleet drifted among the wreckage. Crews worked tirelessly to repair ships, rescue survivors, and honor the fallen. The cost had been great, but the victory was greater. For the first time in centuries, Earth was no longer silent. Humanity had returned, and they had done so with unyielding will. As the Horizon turned toward the stars ahead, Captain Hayes stood at the bridge, his crew beside him. He thought of Earth, of the long years of hiding, of the sacrifices made to reach this day. And he knew one truth above all: humanity was no longer forgotten. They had risen, and they would never fade again.